Hi, and welcome. Thank you for joining us today, where we're going to be talking about alternative proteins. In this, our third session, we're looking at Are You Insect Curious? So my name is Wendy Hewitson, and I am the Agritech Program Manager for Barclays Eagle Labs. So today we have asked Wayne Martindale from the National Centre for Food Manufacturing at Lincoln University, Thomas Constant, the CEO and founder of BioBayer, and Daniela Arias Raviera, COO and co-founder of SIBO. They're going to be joining us today to give us some tips and tricks on the role of insects as a source of alternative protein in regards to the sustainability of the agricultural sector and the food supply chain. Now, the topics discussed today are an overview of options for you to think about and to help you with your independent research and business decisions. So they aren't intended as recommendations or advice. So please remember as well that your business has its own individual circumstances, so the statements and views expressed may not be applicable or suitable for your business. So as I said, my name is Wendy Hewitson, and I am the Agritech Program Manager for Barclays Eagle Labs. But what is Eagle Labs? Have you heard of us? What do we do? So Barclays UK operates the UK's largest network of business incubators, and that is the Eagle Labs. We have a combined community of over 600 technology startups and accelerating businesses across 25 locations in the UK. So Eagle Labs brings together a community of startups, innovators, industry specialists, mentors, and we create an interconnected ecosystem. So we aim to support the acceleration of startups, transforming corporates, and empowering those future skills needed for the success of the ecosystem. But where are we? Where are the Eagle Labs? The Eagle Labs are situated throughout the UK, from as far south as Guernsey and Jersey in the Channel Islands, right the way up to Aberdeen in the north of Scotland. So why are we looking at Agritech, and why do I love the job I do? Well, Agritech is part of our vision, the vision to accelerate the UK's agricultural industry along the adoption of those emerging technologies and aid the increase of efficiencies across that food supply chain from field to fork, whether that's from growing more food with less resources, to the use of robotics for planting and picking, or demonstrating how AI can improve resilience. We're empowering the industry to make better decisions on how to improve their business for now and for the future. So Agritech Eagle Labs are tailoring specifically a package to support those Agritech businesses and give them access to the full Eagle Labs network to offer them all the opportunities it can bring. We were lucky enough in October 2020 to open our very first Eagle Lab farm. Now, this is in partnership with the University of Lincoln on the Rise Home campus. So like a traditional incubator, it has desks and offices and access to event space, but it also has, if you think about it, their 200-hectare campus with access to vegetable fields, polytunnels, livestock, arable fields, even a dummy pack house and supermarket aisle as part of their offering to our residents. So we're really, really proud and excited to see where that goes. I'm sure you all know what Agritech is, but Agritech is purely the use of technology and technological innovations to improve the efficiencies and outputs of agriculture. It's the application of technology to improve all elements of farming and growing processes. Now, you'll have seen in my previous events, we've looked at IoT, we've looked at AI and robotics, we've looked at soil health, and we've even looked at vertical farming. But today's session, as I said, is around alternative proteins and are you insect curious? So why are we looking at this? Agritech, food production, the world's population is expected to increase by a further 2 billion in the next 30 years, taking us from an approximate 7.7 billion people on the planet to 9.7 billion in the year 2050. And it's expected that we will require an additional 60 to 70% more food to support us. So the food industry is facing enormous systemic challenges, and further expansion of agriculture is not a viable solution to meet the future needs, because we're nearly using all of the land that is suitable for agriculture already. In fact, the UK feed industry imports more than 70% of its maize, soya and rapeseed requirements every year. Significant quantities of those are imported from the USA, and some of this will actually be GM. So alternative protein sources are becoming more important for a sustainable food production system, with consumers looking more environmentally friendly products and with lower impact on animal welfare. So production of insect protein and lipids is seen as one solution, as insects can convert organic residues from food and feed, side streams with high efficiency into valuable food and feed products. Furthermore, this allows for the reuse of valuable nutrients, and therefore, we're developing a circular economy within agriculture. Now, it is likely that you can dismiss insects as a nuisance, and it's also likely you don't view them first and foremost as a source of protein for human consumption. However, 80% of the world's population already eat bugs. In fact, there are over 2,000 types of edible insects. So eating insects is not new, but large-scale insect farming for both human consumption and animal feed has been suggested as one of the next agricultural commodities to support the worldwide demand for sustainable protein sources. So new research and developments in this fledgling food category is happening more widely. So can insect protein be a serious alternative for the more conventional of other animal-based protein sources? That's the question we're here to ask today. So are you insect curious? Now, I'm really privileged to have some of those experts join us today, where they can tell you more about the research and development that's been undertaken in this fascinating area, and also hear about some of those new businesses and their business models that are emerging into the marketplace. So for this, our third session, as I mentioned, my first speaker today is Wayne Martindale, who is the Associate Professor at the National Centre for Food Manufacturing at Lincoln University. So, good afternoon, Wayne. How are you?
Good afternoon, Wendy. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here. It's a great privilege.
Not a problem. I'm really looking forward to hearing about what you're going to say today. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over for your presentation.
Thank you, Wendy. Well, as you know, I'm Wayne Martindale, and I work at the National Centre for Food Manufacturing, which is at the University of Lincoln. Like the Rise Home campus, we have a food manufacturing site, and we have a couple of food manufacturing halls, and we have a whole new centre being built that will open this year. But we're really concerned with the actual putting together of the ingredients that come off of farms into food and beverage products. And one of the things that I'm going to emphasise today is the value of looking at our global food system and the value of understanding where resources are in that system and knowing where they're going, and then how they're going to be used by us, the 9 billion consumers in the world of 2050, when we make them into meals and develop diets. Because if we can do that, we can project sustainable outcomes, we can project different types of diets, and see what types of impacts and benefits and potential negative impacts those diets and resource use systems have. And that's incredibly important, particularly with respect to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which I will mention. But the basic issue is pretty simple. We need to know where stuff is, we need to know where it's going, and we need to know how it's being used to give businesses a very good handle on things like consumer experience, sustainability, and so on. Before I present some data, what I'd like to do is give some historical context to this need to know where things are and how they're being used and where they're going. We've all heard of boom and bust. Boom and bust economics. That is, if we like something, we'll use it today and tomorrow, and we'll keep using it because we like using it. But that often could mean that there's less and less of it available tomorrow. And that's called the so-called boom and bust scenario. And that has quite a long history. A couple of hundred years ago, in the 18th century, the person that you can see on the far right of this slide was someone called the Reverend Thomas Malthus. And he noted that population growth is exponential, whereas the rate at which we can use natural resources often happens in a linear fashion. So population growth seems to outstrip resource use potential, and therefore there will be a big busting tomorrow. And this type of thinking has gone throughout history. It still exists today, but it's notable at the end of the 1960s, a professor from Harvard University, Paul Ehrlich, published a book that sold millions of copies, incredibly popular and influenced much thinking, called The Population Bomb. Now, whereas these guys were not wrong, they raised issues around our fears, around projecting the future of tomorrow. They never quite got it right. And they never quite got it right because they never embedded the impact of innovation into these outcomes. And of course, now when we look at resource use, we think about sustainability. We think about things called ecosystem services. We think about industries and how it's structured to deliver sustainable outcomes. And that has a huge impact. And I, for one, do not believe that boom and bust happens anymore. I think we're smarter than that now. And that really goes to the heart of this idea of where do we get future proteins from, and the role of insects in that type of system, for example. So that's the context, and I'd like to show some data here on the supply of plant proteins to typical consumers around the world. You can see here on the green bars on this graph, these show the supply of plant protein to a typical consumer every day across different regions of the world. And on the far left of that graph, you can see the average for the world. That shows us that around about 50 grams of plant protein are supplied to every person in the world every day. And this value is between 40 and 50 grams across most continents, apart from Oceania, which includes Australia and New Zealand. It also includes a lot of smaller island states, Micronesia, Polynesia, and so on, where there isn't enough land to grow crops. So their diets are highly dependent on seafood, for example. So they have lower plant protein supplied to them each day. But generally speaking, plant protein is quite high in terms of how much mass is supplied, around about 40, 50 grams of protein per person per day. And that's relatively stable across the continents. The issue with plant proteins is, one, they're not very diversified. Most of that protein is supplied as wheat and rice. And the other issue is a lot of plant protein is grown for animal feed. Around about 1 billion tons of maize is grown every year, for example, and at least half of that is fed to animals. So there are really important issues around plant proteins, even though we do eat quite a lot of plant protein. The issue is to diversify. The other important issue with regards to the supply of protein globally is inequality. This shows the same graph. The green bars are the same, but the red bars that are included here show the total amount of protein supplied across the global regions. The world average for total protein supplied is around about 80 grams, which means just over half of a typical global diet is made of plant protein. But you can see there's huge variability in the red bars here, but more so there's huge variability between the differences between the green bars and the red bars. Now, the total protein is made up of livestock proteins and seafood proteins as well. And you can see that across the American continent, Central America, South America, and North America, that gap between plant protein is quite large. If it was just North America, it would be even larger. It would be more like Europe. The typical European gets supplied with around about 108 grams of protein per person per day, and at least 60% of that is livestock protein, which requires feeding and producing so that the consumer experience associated with those proteins, including dairy, of course, are acceptable. Now, there is a case to reduce that amount of protein, and that's important here, because if we can reduce the amount of livestock protein consumed, there are proven health benefits and sustainability benefits associated with that. And we do have the technologies to do that. We also have the tools to project the impacts of that and make sure that it works nutritionally. If we all went vegan tomorrow, we would have to have a very good idea of the nutritional value of the changes in food that we're eating. So inequality is an important issue, and knowing where things are and where they're going and how they're being used is incredibly important. This is how we do things at the moment. We harvest large plants of large amounts of plants, in this case soybean. We harvest smaller amounts of fish meal, and we feed that to animals. And you can see here in these central pieces of data the production of maize globally and the production of soybean, the principal plants that are fed to animals. What is noticeable in both of these graphs is the production is going up. But what is also noticeable is that large amounts of these graphs show that, as I've already said, around about 60% of the maize grown is fed to animals, and it's increasing. That's really important. With soybean, the situation is more complex in that soybean is crushed for oil and the seed meal left over is fed to animals. But that's still around about 60, 70, 80% of soybeans grown are actually fed to livestock. Now, these are innovative industries. They're well segmented, they're efficient, and they supply. But the important thing is there is an increase in demand for animal feeds globally. And this is where insects come in, because insect larvae are an important source of alternative protein that can be used as feed. Now, it's not a case of replacing plant feeds with insect feeds. It's a case of utilizing insect feeds to make the feed system more resilient. And one of the insects that we're working on at the University of Lincoln is shown here on the right of this slide, the black soldier fly. And black soldier fly larvae are an important source of high quality protein and oils and other bioactive ingredients that have high nutritional value in foods and feeds that are of great interest to us. If we can increase the efficiency of black soldier fly production and localize it, then that has significant benefits to feed supply globally. Lastly, I want to go back to where I started, the importance of mapping resources and how they move around and how they're used, and also the importance of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. My research at the National Centre for Food Manufacturing is very much concerned with SDG 12, responsible consumption and production. And one of the things that we do is we map resource flows in food systems and food supply chains, and that's what these tiles show below that SDG picture. And we can map how agricultural commodities move around supply chains. We can map how food and beverage products are distributed. We can map how foods and beverages are consumed across populations and project the outcomes for carbon footprints, water use, nutrition, and so on. We can also project risk across these supply chains. And that's incredibly important, especially when we're considering livestock products where we want to increase the resilience of the supply of things like feeds. So we can project the impact of increasing the productivity of black soldier fly larvae feed, for example, in these scenarios. So that's a very brief overview of what we do. We look at new technologies, innovative technologies, and we project how they can be embedded into the current food system using these types of models called digital twins. I would like to stress that this isn't a one-for-one replacement. It's a system approach. It's a business system approach that aims to stabilize and give more resilience to our food system so that we can reach sustainable outcomes. So that's a very brief overview of what we do in my group at NCFM. I hope it's given you some ideas, and I look forward to the panel discussion in a moment. Thank you for listening.
That was really interesting, Wayne. Thank you so much. What I'll do, I'll probably pick on some of those things you talked about later on in our Q&A, because I've had quite a few questions actually emailed through. So what I'm going to do now is ask our next speaker, which is Thomas Constant, who is the CEO and founder of BioBuyer, to join us. So Thomas, welcome. How are you today?
Hi, Wendy. I'm great. Thanks for the invite. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. I'm really, really excited to actually hear a bit more about BioBuyer. So I'm going to actually hand it over straight to you. Thank you, Thomas.
Thanks, Wendy. So, hi. I'm really excited to be speaking to you today about my views towards the insect market, what we're doing at BioBuyer, and how I see the future. So before I dive into all that information, I just want to give a bit of an overview about who I am and why I'm speaking. So as I said, hi, I'm Thomas. My background is actually as an industrial designer. I founded BioBuyer back in mid-2019. So it's a pretty early company. It's a very early stage startup, and it's only been a year and a half, but we've accomplished a lot. So it feels a lot longer. But we're currently based in Leicestershire, so right in the heart of England. And our first major milestone was back in August 2020 when we launched our first product on Kickstarter, which was a great success. So what is BioBuyer? So the name BioBuyer actually comes from the Irish Gaelic word meaning food for life. And so we're trying to really achieve that with what we're doing as a company. So we basically design, manufacture, and ship mealworm growing pods that empower people to grow a source of mealworms in their home as an alternative protein. So our current mealworm pods are actually made from recycled British bioplastic, and they're basically a configuration of 5 plastic trays that passively stagger the development of mealworms. So you have a continuous output of mealworm production in your home. The thing is, what's really novel and quite neat about our product is that to do this, you reuse your uneaten fruit and vegetable waste and convert it into insect protein. So it's a really neat product that recycles your food waste and converts it into insect protein. The idea of it, actually, I came up with the idea of it back when I was at university. And as I said, I was a designer, and I saw there was loads of great innovation happening around pre-made insect foods. But there wasn't much innovation happening around trying to empower people to produce their own source of insect food. So I basically designed the precursor to what you see here, and we launched it on Kickstarter. So as I said, when we launched on Kickstarter, last year in August, and since then we've been growing and expanding our sales and our team. So right now we've sold hundreds of products all across the globe, almost 30 countries in total. So that's from Australia to Mexico, from Brazil to Russia, really kind of all over the world, almost on every continent, excluding Antarctica, of course. But hey, maybe that's where we can market to next, maybe. But yeah, so the reason why I developed this product and why we started BioBuyer was basically because insects are super sustainable. I mean, from the infographic alone, you can kind of see how insects use a fraction of the water, land, and emit a fraction of the greenhouse gas output compared to traditional livestock. So you can see that beef, pork, and chicken produce a tremendous amount of emissions and need an awful lot of water and land, especially beef. Compared to that, mealworms use a fraction of the land and resources. Not only are they super sustainable, but they're also extremely nutritious. For example, mealworms themselves require, when cooked, are around 54% protein, contain all 9 essential amino acids, and are full of vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants. So they're extremely sustainable and also extremely nutritious. And as I said earlier, the great thing about what we're doing is that we're trying to empower an individual to grow their own at home by reusing their uneaten fruit and vegetable waste. So a truly neat and novel circular economy approach that empowers someone to live a more sustainable lifestyle. So we initially targeted and developed our pods for a Western market to produce their own source of food for themselves. However, since releasing the product and talking to our customers, we've realized that our product can have a massive impact in other markets, one of these markets being animal feed. So our pods can be used to create a sustainable and, importantly, really affordable source of animal feed, not just for livestock, but also for pets. In the UK alone, there's over 5.4 million households that actually have pets that consume mealworms. That can be lizards to chickens to wild birds to fish. There's loads of pets in this country that eat mealworms. So our pods can create a really affordable and sustainable animal feed for those pets and also livestock. Another future market where we see our product can have massive impact is in low and middle income countries. Currently, that which was previously mentioned by Wendy, insects are eaten all over the world, and many of those people who eat insects are located in Africa and Southeast Asia. So if we scale our product up by 250%, we would have enough of an output to feed, to meet the daily recommended protein intake for 2 young children. So we could potentially combat child malnutrition, which would be an amazing thing. And also, as different regions around the world have different views towards insects, as Wendy said, there's over 2,000 different kinds of edible insects. So you have much different views from region to region to those insects. So where in regions where they have less appeal to eat, they can be used as livestock feed. So if you're a small holding family, you can produce sustainable, affordable insect protein to feed your chickens, animals, or even fish. So our pods could be used to empower people to actually grow sustainable food by themselves by reusing their uneaten or waste fruit and veg. I like to finish by saying this because I really feel it's a great quote and it really embodies what we're trying to do at Be a Buyer. So, give a person a fish, you feed them for a day. Teach a person to fish, you feed them for a lifetime. And ultimately, that's what we're trying to do at Be a Buyer. That was just a really quick introduction to what we're doing, but thanks so much for listening, and I hope you all have a great day.
Thank you so much, Thomas. That was really, really insightful. And I think it's, really, really great to see so many innovative ideas coming out and spinning out both from university and then actually bringing it to life. So that is fabulous. Again, what I'm going to do is bring you back in after my next speaker. And again, there's a few questions I'd like to ask you directly as well, Thomas. So thank you. So my final speaker for the day is Daniela Arias Riviera, and she is the COO and co-founder of Cibotech. So welcome, Daniela.
Hi, how are you, Wendy? Thank you for having me.
No, I'm really, really pleased you could join us today because I'm really, really excited to find out what you've been up to and the different elements that all come under Cibotech. So with that, I'm going to hand over to you to really educate us now, Daniela.
Hi, everyone. My name is Daniela Arias. I am the co-founder and CEO of Cibo. And at Cibo, what we do is that we create thoughtful innovations. Let me explain a little bit more about this. Well, as you all know, there are 4 main problems in the world. The first being food waste in terms of global food production, that we have a third going to waste. Of course, plastic waste, climate change and greenhouse gas emissions from agriculture, food industry, and all of the sources that we all know. And as well, that we have a problem, and a growing problem in terms of food scarcity and malnutrition, because we need to feed almost 10 billion people by 2050. So one of the things that we say at the company is that what we're eating is killing us and is killing the planet. So we needed to find a better solution, a good fit for all of these 4 problems. And what we found was basically insects, as we all know. Cibo is basically, a company that has the purpose of leading the food industry to a sustainable future by creating innovative biomaterials from insects. We believe in a greener and healthier future, and that is basically possible by changing the basis of production without waiting the consumer behavior to change. Actually, let me tell you a little bit more about SIBO and what is the meaning of the name. I'm originally from Costa Rica in Central America, and SIBO is the name of the main Costa Rican god or deity that taught native Costa Ricans how to use their natural resources in an efficient and sustainable way, living in accordance to the nature. So this is basically the perfect tribute for my background and my co-founder's background, and basically what it's the purpose of the company as well. We're, as you already heard, aligned as well with the SDGs. We have a collaboration strategy. We don't want to be the biggest insect farm in the world. We want to create a big network and a strong network of collaborators between academia, other businesses and industries as well. And well, basically we provide tailored and functional solutions to create thoughtful innovations, as I already mentioned. Let me explain a little bit more about what we do at SIBO and how everything is related. So basically, we started the company originally in Costa Rica, farming insects, and we have our Agritech division, which is basically the source and our supply chain. This is where we partner with families in the rural areas of the country, and they grow insects for our supply chain. In Costa Rica, this is basically happening as well with a collaboration strategy with an university, cooperative, and also Impact Help San Jose. And so we're having this national insect farming program, as we call it. From these insects that we get and we make them into raw materials, cricket powder, we're working right now with crickets. We are making, and we are taking this cricket powder into our food tech division, which is basically focused on selling food ingredients and creating food for humans, basically using these raw materials. And the third part of the business is taking it one step further, because of course we couldn't just stick with that. And we also found out that insects have a great potential in terms of biomaterials and creating new innovations and unexpected innovations. So we decided as well, like I told you, to take it one step further and make extracts. So right now what we're working on is developing a process of extraction and extraction process to get the protein, the fats, and the fiber, which are the main components of these insects that we're getting. And let me explain each of these divisions in just one other slide to be perfectly clear. So in our Agritech division, we, as I already explained, have the basic farming process and material extraction and transformation to the raw materials. The company in Costa Rica is called Costa Rica Insect Company, and we create cricket powder and other raw materials. The food tech division, it's one that I'm going to be explaining a little bit more because it's actually located in the UK. The company in the UK locally is called Be Bite Foods. This is basically as well our brand. And we create foods and snacks with the raw materials that we get from Costa Rica. And we manufacture them in the UK. This is basically also allowing us to get into the European market. And right now what we're working in is basically food formulations and food ingredients, the main one being the protein extract. And to finalize the biotech division scope that I already mentioned, our brand is called Entowise, and what we're developing is with the separation of the components, we get the fiber, as I mentioned, and we can actually turn it into a biopolymer to create what we call our entoplastic and other biomaterials and further applications for a plastic, for the plastic waste solutions that we need. So these are the key products in development that I already mentioned. The first one being from our Be Bite brand in the UK. This basically, it's a food line that has tasty food ingredients and formulations that are high in protein, high in fiber, and low in sugar. And our protein extract, which is a product that solves the current limitations of the insect-based protein available, because we are basically providing a protein that it's water soluble and that it already basically has the best things in terms of amino acid content and digestibility digestibility. I don't know how to say this, but basically that we're taking the best of this protein into our bodies. So these are the two main key products that we're working with. The food line is already done, and the protein extract is at TRL 5. At BeBite, as I told you, we are basically creating innovative food products using insects and also some other sources. We're exploring food waste as well, or just upcycling other materials. Right now, well, I already mentioned that we have ready the cricket chips, which are basically like a salty cracker. The protein powder is in development, but we already have some other future products in line, like cricket bread, pancake mix, cricket pasta, and also even, why not, an insect-based ice cream. So this is how we basically mentioned that we don't want to change consumer behavior towards insect. We want to basically change the basis of the production of these products and to make them sustainable, healthier, and of course, delicious. As I mentioned, the BeBite way, BeBite for us is more than just a snack. We provide circular economy because our ingredients are upcycled, and of course, we're making use of these insects that are already as well into a circular economy system. We get social support from the raw materials that we're getting from Costa Rica. And of course, they're sustainable and safe. And we basically make sure our production uses low amounts of energies, and food and water intakes are as low as we can get it as well. So at BeBite and then the food tech division of our company, we want you to be healthy, be sustainable, but of course, be tasty.
Thank you, Daniela. That was amazing. And it's nice to see that you're not just concentrating on one area. I particularly like the entoplastic.
Yeah.
I think that's really, really initiative, and I look forward to seeing how that goes. So what I'm going to do is bring back in Thomas and Wayne. And as I mentioned at the beginning, I've had some really, really key questions sent through to me. And hopefully you guys will be able to answer these for me, because you're the specialists, the experts in the room. So let's kick off straight away. So I'm probably going to ask each one of you this, because it's really prevalent to each of the opportunities and what you were talking about. So many people can obviously see the benefits of insect protein for, like you mentioned before, countries with poor land or critical water supply issues, or even the lack of readily available other protein sources such as meat. Why, or do you see there is a need for this type of farming in the UK? And I'm probably going to come to yourself first, Daniela. What's your views on this?
Well, basically, we still need to find, from my perspective, I think that we still need to find new ways and new sources of protein and of food, basically, for human consumption. So it's definitely one of the best choices that we can get. Is one of the most scalable as well. And we can have them even at home with the solutions that we already saw today. So it's definitely a way to move forward. And I think that if we can continue working with more farmers or with more people, the impact will just be even bigger.
And probably you can add on to that, Thomas, because obviously you're in the sort of similar area. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I fully agree with what was previously said. And also just, I'm very in line with this, trying to empower, try and have a bottom-up approach where you're kind of empowering an individual to kind of be able to produce their own source of kind of sustainable protein, to take the burden off, importing it from other countries, and really trying to reduce that food amount and kind of increase that self-sufficiency where and when it's appropriate. So I think insects are a really appropriate food source for that.
And from a research and development perspective, with Whole Beach in mind sort of way, what are your thoughts on it as a type of farming practice for the UK?
I think all of these points are incredibly important from a food resilience, a food system stability point of view. And one of the things that clearly that I'm going to be biased on is the actual manufacture of food and beverage products from agricultural ingredients and commodities. One of the things that's central there is assurance and safety of products. Consumers need to have confidence in products, and I think what has been emphasised today is losing sight of where things are produced, and things like the production of insect proteins give us the opportunity to have an almost direct line of sight to the production of feeds and foods that are going to be transformed into proteins and formulated into products. And that type of assurance is incredibly important to consumers, particularly in the current world of the last year or so, where there have been particular stresses on supply chains. Many of those are very real, but we've also seen high resilience, and we've also seen concerns, certainly in the last 10 to 20 years, with regards to transfer of pathogens in food supply chain, and also the issue that you mentioned earlier of genetic technologies in food supply chain. So line of sight to the production of these types of things is incredibly important in insurance, and I think that's been brought up today. And that is a clear business edge in many instances.
Yeah, and I think adding on from that, I mean, this is obviously, we're talking about, rules of engagement, policy and all of that in the background. So perhaps yourself, Thomas and Daniela, when I'm looking at this and I'm looking at it from a wider perspective. So what areas are you seeing the most engagement from? Is it directly from farming? Is it societal? Is it communities? Is it, an educational piece? So where are you getting that engagement from initially? Thomas, probably come to yourself first.
Sure. I mean, great question. So interestingly, as I said kind of in my talk, we kind of initially launched this product as a kind of a novel way Westerners could grow a sustainable protein source in their kitchen, no matter where they live. Like, for example, if you live in the middle of a city, you would have this small growing pod in your home to produce a sustainable source of protein. But interestingly, we've had a huge uptick from people who just have pets and who have pets that eat these sorts of insects and want an affordable and importantly sustainable source of protein that they can feed to them. So we're having an interestingly large engagement from pet owners who have insect-eating pets.
Wow, interesting. And what about yourself, Daniela?
Well, since the company, and as I already mentioned, has like 3 different levels, basically back home in Costa Rica, we are getting tons of engagements from farmers. And because it's basically this past year, we launched the National Insect Farming Program, in which we're taking insect farming at a national level. It's a small country, so this is why we can do it. But it's something that can be replicable, and it could be something that can happen in other countries of the world. And basically from farmers, from people located in rural areas of the country, I want to grow insects, I want to do this, I can do this, I have the space, I have the time. So a lot of engagement from local farmers. And here, now that we have taken the step further to develop food tech and of course the biotech, there has been a lot of interest coming from academia, and as you mentioned, people looking into those new developments and innovations that could potentially reach to basically one of this main problems, as I mentioned, with the biopolymer and the antiplastic, and from the food tech as well, from people basically in retail stores that are like, I would like to have this for the final consumer, because we don't manufacture ourselves. We work with other manufacturers in the UK, but it's basically as well it has taken a little bit of engagement from retailers that they want to put this product into market.
Fab. So for yourself, Wayne, and probably for a lot of the other academia where the research and development's being done, who do you see are going to be the influencers or even the enablers that can bring these technologies together and make them reality and also make them commercial?
Well, in applied research, I work with a lot of ingredients producers, because we get the industries processing around ingredients right, then we reach the ideal formulation for food and beverage products. So integrators are really important, and how I view ingredients manufacturers in the industry, I look at them as integrating into that process. And of course, let's not forget the technology integrators, the new technologies. Things have to be dried and milled and made into ingredients. So those are often the critical points where there are often bottlenecks in getting products to people who can use them, businesses, suppliers, and eventually, of course, working the right ingredient to give the right consumer experience and acceptability. All those things are important. So those integrating processes are absolutely key. I would also say, the issue of pets and animals, it's huge. I mean, as anyone that owns animals knows that their nutrition is incredibly important, sometimes more important than our own. We observe their nutrition more than our own. And certainly we've seen diversification of products in that marketplace. And if you look at how poultry is kept in the UK, it's incredibly diverse, and it's a huge sector. And also, wild bird feeding. I know of people in agriculture that have diversified it into bird food because there is a business potential there. And they have certainly said to me in recent history, the price of mealworms is only going one way, and that is up. And it really concerns them that they have to import their mealworms for wild bird food. But it's a huge industry. Many people overlook it and say, well, it doesn't really matter. But think about what feeding wild birds, it engages people with their local environment. It gets them interested in their local environment, and there are huge sustainability benefits of that. So often the idea of overlooking something that isn't completely obvious or seems relatively not worthwhile is often the link into a much wider market with huge benefits.
Yeah, really interesting, because as we say, we're looking now at trying to make agriculture a truly circular economy. And one of those things that we do need to understand is what people want, what people need, but also what the actual industry sectorially needs. So when we look at the future of insect farming and alternative proteins, Thomas, what do you think? This is just putting you on the spot here. What do you think will be the next big thing?
Outside of edible insects?
Just within the alternative protein sector itself.
I mean, I'm pretty biased because I'm very pro kind of enabling people with tools. So like kind of from the bottom up approach. So I think it's going to be more local. It's kind of localizing food manufacturing wherever possible. And in my opinion, ideally, to the individual level, I think. So that localizing effect will be kind of increasingly important and a big trend for the next decade.
And your thoughts on that, Daniela?
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm totally biased, but what I would say is that I would say that what I expect and what I would hope that would happen in the next years is that we can get actually, because at the company, what we know and what we have seen is that farmers shape the future of and shape the food that we eat. Basically, when we get something farmed from our neighbor or ourselves, we are more likely to continue eat it as well. This is also why plant protein is normal and more accepted, because you see it every day. You know that someone grew it and farmed it. So I would say that my hope is that we can get more insect farmers locally in every country, household or farms as well, big farm, so that it can be culturally more accepted for the final consumer and as well for the industries, because it will have to be more available as well.
So I think I'll start with yourself on this one, Wayne. If there was one thing you would want to change to ensure the sustainability and success of alternative proteins, what would this be and what needs to be done?
I think we are very much prisoners of certain things, and we are prisoners of the land that surrounds us, the land resources that we have available to us. We are prisoners of our genes. Many of our lifestyles and lifestyle outcomes are down to how we metabolize ingredients and food and those types of things. And we are often constrained by the economic opportunities that we're exposed to in our lives. And I think it's very easy for us to talk about solutions as one size fits all. I was quite taken that, when I think of agriculture, I think of agriculture in northwestern Europe, and that really isn't representative of what goes on in the world. So I think what we really need to do is to get a realistic picture of solutions that do provide stability, sustainability, and resilience, because it's very tempting with me sitting here in the centre of the UK to think that I have solutions that will work in Lincolnshire and Yorkshire, and they will work all around the world, and they won't, of course, because we don't all eat the same, we don't all have the same lifestyle. And I think that we need to, what I really want to do in my research is to assess what does represent a perfect diet, and how can that be delivered for 9 billion consumers in the world of 2050. That's what I want to do. And it's very easy for us to fall into the trap that because I live like this, then 9 billion other people should. And I really don't think we should do that. And I think we're developing the analytical tools that will allow us to project those types of scenarios for 9 billion consumers, and that will be really positive.
Really interesting, because as you say, I'm very different from you, very different from Thomas, very different from Daniela. And as you said, there's 9 other billion people that all have different habits and everything else. So it wouldn't be right if I didn't actually ask these burgeoning tech startups here today if they were to think back and give themselves one piece of advice for anybody entering into Agritech or into alternative proteins that you've learned. I'm sure you've had a few challenges. What would it be? And I'll come to you first, Thomas, on that one.
That's a good question. I would, so taking from my past experience, starting up and being a really early stage startup, it's just being really focused and really kind of understanding your market segment, because that's something we're still currently doing, and we will be growing and scaling later this year. But to get to this point, there's been a lot of research, conversation, and really kind of understanding your USP and your niche customer segment, and think like almost like a monopolist. And so where you want to dominate and kind of target that sector, and then once you've done that, you can kind of expand and grow after that. But you need to have that niche really kind of pinned down at the start.
Fab. And what about yourself, Daniela, in the businesses under SIVO?
I don't know. There are so many lessons that I've learned and so much advice that I could give. But I would say that the main thing and the most important thing is that if you want to start a business and get into Agritech, I think that it's just so rewarding to be able to match it with something that rings in your head and that matches your purpose as well. So if you want to do good in the world and just basically work at Agritech because you're finding a solution for, I don't know, because you're coming from a farming family or whatever, you want to provide some sort of solution, and it equalizes your purpose as well. I think that's basically the best thing.
Great. That's really, really interesting. And I'm sure everybody listening in will want to know and say and learn from you. So I'm sure some of them will be reaching out afterwards. So I think really it only just takes me to say thank you very much. I've loved listening to your presentations. And every time I do these, I learn more and more and more. And the main reason I love the job I do, and I'm so passionate about the sector, is that I get to showcase some of the research being done and some of those burgeoning technologies. So, Wayne, thank you very much for your time today. Thomas, same to you, and same to Daniela. So, as I mentioned, we love to hear what you think of our events, and it helps me shape what type of events I can do going forward. So shortly after the end of the presentations and these questions, there will be a QR code comes up on the screen. And what I'd like you to do is take the time to scan that QR code and feedback what you enjoyed. And if you would like to be connected with any of the speakers from today's session, or you want to be connected with any of the previous speakers from our sessions, and also let me know what you would like to see more of. Is there any technology that's really, at the precursor or the forefront that you would like to see coming into agriculture? So, as I said, thank you so much, Daniela. Thank you, Thomas, and thank you, Wayne. And most importantly, thank you guys for joining us at home. Take care now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.